days from now, Portland will be host to two groups, and they couldn't be more dissimilar. Their simultaneous presence here has already generated tension and could trigger violence.
And then all the police and stuff, the mayor came out, a whole bunch of it.
That is why you hear us say we're on the road to paradise. We're on the road to paradise. Nothing could be so hard. Nothing could be so hard.
And by the way, here's the first thing I'm going to ask. How many of you were at Vortex 1, a biodegradable festival of life? Yeah. Can I hear it again? How many were here? Now, how many of you remember a damn thing? And Nixon was coming, and this was a few months after the shootings at Kent State University, after he announced the incursion of Cambodia, which has set off all this firestorm around campuses, high school, and colleges. It basically shut down American education institutions. Inconceivable that anything like that could happen today, where people just walked out. And so there was a police riot at Portland State University in the park blocks as part of the Cambodia protest. But here comes Nixon scheduled to speak 3 months later in Portland. And there was an organization called the People's Army Jamboree that decided to hold a concurrent event at the exact same time that the Legion was going to be in town. And so the FBI gave Governor Tom McCall, Republican, then facing a tough re-election bid that summer of 1970. He had served one term, but he is not the Tom McCall of legend that we now know. That emerged in the second term. So he was facing a re-election bid, and the FBI comes to him and says, look, you are facing the greatest threat to civil order since the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. They are going to tear the Rose City apart. You can expect 25,000 Legionnaires, you know, they were Nixon's favorite group to speak to, and 50,000 anti-war protesters converging on Portland. And we know now from history that the FBI and all these law enforcement agencies planted their agent provocateurs inside the anti-war groups to manifest trouble, to make the left look like they were going to be unruly. It's been documented. I'm not making that up. You guys all know that, okay? So there was a fear of that. So 4 young people walked out of a contentious People's Army Jamboree meeting in early June of 1970 at the Centenary Wilbur Church. Anybody remember that? Lee, am I saying it right? Centenary Wilbur Church, correct, over in southeast Portland. And these young people walked out and said, we're going to do something different here. We are not going to get caught in the paradigm of what happened in 1968 in the streets of Chicago. They battled in the street. And so they decided that they wanted to hold some alternative event outside of the state of Portland. 4 of them got into a 1962 Opel Kadett and drove Highway 99 down and met Lieutenant Tom McCall's Chief of Staff, Ed Westerdahl. One of those 4 who drove the Opel Kadett, I don't think he drove it, he's right here today. His name is Lee Meyer. Will you stand up, Lee Meyer? Lee Meyer can't stand up anymore. There we go, Lee Meyer. Lee was 20 years old at the time, and one of the great ironies I discovered was that his conscientious objector service was putting on Vortex. That's pretty cool, all right? So Lee went down there. I mean, they didn't know what they were doing. I mean, come on. They just basically knocked on the door and said, we need a place to hold a festival. And Ed Westerdahl is really an unsung hero in this event. He was McCall's right-hand man, And he immediately seized an opportunity, and it was a controversial one because it was meant to use youth culture to get them outside of town to forestall violence. And when he pitched this idea of McIver Park, Westerdahl told me, we chose McIver because there was one way in, one way out. And we could corral the hippies down there if they got out of control. That was the verb that he used, corral, okay? So Westerdahl pitched it to McCall. McCall, there's a famous scene where his back's to his aides, and this is like 4 months before the election. And those of you that know your rock history, this is also right after Altamont, free rock festival that was an abomination, rape, murder, thuggery. Okay, so the idea that a state was going to get behind something like this was just unbelievable. So McCall turns around in his swivel chair. I've made my decision. I've just committed political suicide. We're going to have Vortex 1, and they did on this very field 44 summers ago. And McCall, as you well know, some of you know, he won re-election after there was one broken window, and I think even that's an apocryphal story. Nothing happened. And so that's one of the reasons why Vortex disappeared as a story, because nothing did happen. There's no negative, right? So we resurrected it, and we're here today to celebrate unconventional risk-taking by a Republican governor. We're here to celebrate young people taking something into their own hands because they didn't want to fall into a paradigm of violence. There are people that are still upset with what happened at Vortex because they felt that the Vietnam War still should have been protested vigorously downtown when the Legion was here. Because another 10,000 Americans are going to die in the war from 1970 to 1975. That's a lot of people. Countless Vietnamese. They'll never know the count there. So those are the kind of questions you guys should have together. Talking. Did we do the right thing? Did it work? Did it siphon people off? In McCall's biography by Brent Wolf, he says that it's a myth that it worked. It's no myth. I interviewed hundreds of people who were going to the demonstrations in downtown Portland who said, I think I'll end up at McIver Park. Now, whether that was a sellout or this or that, you talk about that amongst yourselves on our little walking tour. That's why we're here today. It's a living history event. So that's what I want to say. And I got a couple other announcements. After this, I'm going to lead a little walking tour where we're going to kind of go where I have a little map up here from 1970. So if you want to accompany me, it's not going to be very long. We're just basically going to go around this area, around a mode section. The stage was right there, right in front of that little grove of alders right there. And at the height of the festival on August 31st, 1970, there were 35,000 people on this field. This is an incredible number. And I want to thank everybody who's brought their photographs. I've already had my mind blown 3 times today by photographs I've never seen before. We also have an oral history tent back there where we've got volunteers from the library, Estacada Library, is gathering stories. I'm going to put out a 2nd edition. I'm making that vow right now. I have no idea what it's going to be because that's Vortex. So please tell your story. People are coming up to me. It's hard for me to get that today, but tell the story. I'll be able to access this archive, and scholars will for years. You guys, this was the only state-sanctioned, state-sponsored rock festival in the history of the United States. And it will be the only one. There was no liability insurance taken out. Can you believe that? And not one permit was issued by the state of Oregon. Oh, for 1970 again, right?